Okay. Hello and greetings, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. I think it should be morning for Professor Edward Hodgins. And um, I'm glad to have you once again here. You've been with us for, let's say, since 2019, ensuring that we make this progression that since we started working on a whole lot from TAFFD, the Tech League, the Education League, and then the Science League. And thank you so much for all the moral and academic support in building these institutions and organization and then the movement. We believe that the best that we can give to our great continent is the right information. And for um, for some years now, I've been emphasizing that Africans need to have a place in the longevity movement, in the longevity community, and that I don't like the idea of people putting up images of poor people as a representation of Africa, poor and hungry people, but poverty of the mind. Okay, here I'm going to use the mic to you so that you can give us a little bit about your background and then you get into the conversation proper. You're welcome. Thank you. Prof, did you get me? I mean, the mic is yours. I don't know if it is from my end. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's hit the ground running. Yeah, you can start.
Hello. Okay.
Hi.
Can I?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Uh, all righty. Hi. Yes, I'm Dr. Edward Hudgens. I wear several hats. I am the head of the Human Achievement Alliance. I'm also a board member and very active in Humanity Plus, and you probably know Natasha Vida Moore and Max Moore and some of the wonderful folks at that organization. And I've done public policy for some 4 decades now, as well as cultural advocacy. And so I think I have a little bit of experience. And so I'm very happy to be associated with Osa Nakachi and some of the other great people. By the way, I'll have you know, just for branding purposes, my coffee cup is on this fine little coaster that has our logo on it. And
Yeah, the back of the coffee
oh
coaster,
yes, and
Afrolongevity. Great.
here's the other side.
Yes.
Yes, longevity, Afrolongevity. So they're right associated. I want to mention I was in Africa in 1990, probably before most of you were born, and I was in Kenya and I was in Tanzania, and the small merchants and entrepreneurs in Tanzania gave me this great sculpture, which I keep right here on my desk or behind my desk all the time. So I remember that wonderful experience. And one of the things that wonderful experience taught me, not that I needed to be taught, was that Africans are just as entrepreneurial, just as innovative as any people anywhere in the world. Um, and where this came from is I was actually touring in Tanzania at the time. It was very, very repressed economically and very poor, but there were entrepreneurs everywhere with little stands, basically taking wood, making it into furniture, taking metal and making it into pots and pans, taking cloth and making it into clothing. Very innovative folks. And I gave a little talk and I said, you're creating something here. You're creating wealth for yourself, and this is very good, but you're creating something else. you're creating something spiritual. I wasn't meaning necessarily in a religious way. They had to translate because some of the people spoke Swahili and I only spoke a little bit of Swahili at the time. And I said, what I mean is this: you're creating something in yourself. You're creating a sense of optimism. You're creating a sense of hope. You're creating empowerment. You know that you do not have to live in poverty and misery. You do not have to watch your children and your friends and so forth suffer the same fate that you are suffering. And so that's one of the great things that I saw is that in Africa, you have this entrepreneurial spirit just as you have in any other part of the world. And another reason I know it is I'm in the state of Maryland, which is right outside of Washington, D.C. And over the last number of years, we've had a lot of health issues with my parents. They're now my late parents. And so I've been to a lot of hospitals and healthcare workers, and also with a couple of my daughters. And one of the interesting things is many of the healthcare providers, a fairly large number of them, including doctors and others, are from Africa. And indeed, in Prince George's County, which is one of the counties right here around the District of Columbia, are from Nigeria. There's some sort of a Nigerian Doctors Association. And what that tells me, of course, is that, not that I needed any education on this, is that Africans, just like Americans or Brits or Indians or anyone else, are entrepreneurial and can do these incredible things, including in the healthcare and longevity area. I also want to call your attention to a book that our organization put out, Seizing Our Singularity Future. And if you want to do a deeper dive into my thinking about these issues, I suggest you look at the chapter in this book. And in fact, even though everyone should go out and buy the book, if you can't do that, I can send you a PDF of the chapter that I did in the book. You should read the whole book, but I can send you the chapter so that you can look in more detail about my thinking on this and my analysis on this. Anyway, but I was asked to speak about longevity activism in Africa and the need for it. I want to start just by saying a few words about what is advocacy. Advocacy, of course, is changing minds, understanding, and knowledge, intellectual understanding and acceptance of certain ideas or premises. And in this case, the importance of living longer and living in good health. It's an intellectual activity. And all of you listening to me, I assume, probably already accept these values. But it's an intellectual thing at that level. Oh, I understand the importance of this. I understand these things. But advocacy also means taking that understanding of longevity and understanding that it must be manifest in the value hierarchy that we each carry around. It's part of our moral infrastructure, you might say. Let me give you an example. I assume that all of the listeners are honest, good, honest people. So when you walk into a store, you generally don't think of how can I rob the store. Without even thinking about it, you think, well, I want this particular item and I will take out and I will give them money and they will give me that item. It's because in your own moral character, in your own values, this is automated. You don't have to have a big intellectual conversation with yourself about, should I rob the store or should I just simply pay for what I want? And what I'm saying is advocacy seeks to instill values in people. And in this case, instill the values of health span and longevity to make that a moral habit. That means changing the culture. Part of advocacy is to change a culture. And one of the examples I give is here in the United States, in the 1950s, approximately half of the population smoked tobacco, smoked cigarettes, which, as we know, is very, very harmful for one's health. Today, only about 12% of Americans smoke cigarettes, smoke tobacco. Now, partly that had to do with government policies and education, but it also had to do with changing the culture, because in the 1950s and before, smoking a cigarette was considered wonderful. It was glamorous. It was romantic. If you look at old movies, you see the American star Humphrey Bogart with a cigarette, and wow, isn't he cool, right? But changing culture is another way that we change values. And in this case, the idea that we take our health and our longevity seriously, and that if you look at that people understand or feel cultural pressure, you might say, to I really have to take care of myself. I can't, smoking isn't good and these other things aren't good. That's what cultural change means. It also means, and I'll talk in much more detail about this in a few minutes, it also means institutional and public policy changes. Because as I look at it, and again, I've been doing public policy for many decades, one of the things that holds back countries, not only in terms of longevity and health, but in terms of prosperity, is the institutions, and in this case, problems with corruption. And the final thing I'll say about what is advocacy. Advocacy means understanding the complexities of countries and communities. Nigeria has many different languages, ethnic groups, customs, religions, and so forth. It has very urban areas, of course, and it has more rural areas. And so when you talk about advocacy, you have to say who's the audience and what is the situation and how can we best appeal in our advocacy efforts. Okay, so now I want to go down to a couple of particular areas and talk to them. The first thing is that I want all of you listening right now to understand that your minds and understandings of technology and the benefits of how longevity, the good things about longevity, how you are the ones who are going to be the leaders, the creators of a better world tomorrow. You might become actual researchers or people who are healthcare providers. You might become teachers in educational institutions. You might become advocates of public policy changes. Whatever it is, you all have to understand that you are in the vanguard of change. You are the people also who are going to be the exemplars. Others are going to look up to you and say, this is inspirational. This is where my values should come from because these people are so articulate and these people are actually doing it. They're not just talking about it. I'm talking about it, but which is you have to do anyway. But they will see that you are the people who are doing it. You have to understand your role in changing the country, the culture, and ultimately leading to health span and longevity, whether you're in Nigeria, South Africa. As I say, I've been to Kenya and Tanzania. Perhaps some of you are listening from those places. So that is the first thing to understand, that you are the start of all of the good things. Okay, this I want to talk about a little bit is the benefits of empowerment, the benefits and empowerment. How can you get people who are worried about their day-to-day lives, who are worried about how to make a living, how to maneuver in difficult cultures, difficult times, and so forth? How do you get them to focus on longevity and health span? Well, the first thing is you have to approach them about the benefits. A lot of people don't even realize that, well, you can have a better, healthier life. Everybody, certainly in all countries, know about the problems of illnesses. They know the problems of people getting sick, people dying, often very, very prematurely. But in so many cases, they don't even understand that there's an alternative. They know that there are doctors. They go to the doctors. Sometimes the health work, the applications work. Sometimes they don't. But the first thing is to show people that there's a different way, that there are benefits that that can be derived, and that this comes from technology. I want to say something else about this. Throughout most of human history, people lived in abject poverty, grueling poverty. Lifespans were very short and often quite miserable, frankly. It was only when people were given the liberty to control their own lives. You might say, I like to say, we talk about healthcare the thing that came before healthcare was wealth care, meaning people could actually do whatever they want to do to create value, trade with their fellows and so forth, and actually improve themselves. That feeling of empowerment rather than helplessness and despair is what helped build the industrialized world that we have today. And it would be the same thing when you're advocating about longevity and health span, is how do you empower people? How do you show that they can take their health and the health of their children, their parents, their relatives, their friends into their own hands? And I want to focus for a minute on technology. One of the things that can be done, certainly in African countries, is to bypass the steps that the industrialized countries took to get to a better situation in healthcare and health span. For example, there's one organization in the United States that I respect that said, well, we could, for the good of Africa, we think they should build 20,000 new brick and mortar hospitals. Okay, sounds like a nice idea. And of course, what I did is I said, well, why? Why do you need that many brick and mortar hospitals? Because we have technology where, for example, if you don't have a big brick and mortar hospital nearby, a lot of things can be taken care of locally. You can have, for example, in this country, we now have smart watches. We now have smart rings. That's my Aura ring right there. My health is being tracked right now in real time. I can show you my heartbeat. I can show you all sorts of stuff about me. And so the idea is that if you're not near a hospital, you have a thing called a lab on a chip, where you can take somebody's blood sample, put it on the chip. The chip will analyze the blood sample. You send it, via an email or however else you can telecommunications. You communicate to an analyst in a hospital or some other facility, and then you get the diagnosis back. In other words, you have to take a look as an advocacy of how you can take this technology and not have to build, 20,000 hospitals. You have to be entrepreneurial and think what actually works, and don't necessarily copy what is being done and what has been done in the Western countries, because you have technology at your fingertips that obviously the countries, where I came from, where I'm at, didn't have back, a century ago when we were improving our system. Of course, you also have to understand that there's a focus for health span and longevity on the basics. In many African countries and many regions of African countries, basic things like sanitation, better diets, things of that sort are going to be primary, just as in this country, in the United States and elsewhere. And more advocates are understanding that it starts with me. If I eat a very, very bad diet, no matter what the science, I'm probably going to get sick. I'm going to have more health problems. So you have to encourage that. And I know that from Osa Nakachi and some of the others, I know that that's something that's being promoted, that you can take your health into your own hands in that way as well. I'll mention a couple of other things that are going on in the United States that might be useful eventually in Africa. And this is kind of high level, and it'll probably take a while, but I think that this is something that can happen in Africa just as in the United States, and maybe even quicker. And there are 5 points here I want to make. First of all, as I kind of already noted, more and more we have wearable devices that can manage, that can measure and track our healthcare in real time, whether it's a watch or a ring, or you can even have a device, for example, that if everybody in a small town, let's say, can't afford these, you can probably have some community things where you can go in and simply get your information recorded there, and all the information about you. More and more genetic sequencing is something that's becoming much more affordable in the United States. It used to be the first genetic sequencing in the year 2000 cost, I think it was about $100 million. Then it came down to about $10 million, something like that. Now it's down to a couple of $100. And the point about this is that if my genome is sequenced, I can look at exactly what kind of health problems I could have. And therefore, I can try to take preventive measures for those problems. And so what I'm seeing is the costs come down for collecting that kind of information, or epigenetic information as well. Then you are looking at individualized healthcare and health span and longevity. Not here's what works for 72% of people who are between the age of 20 and 30 and are men and don't have diabetes, but do have this, but each and every individual. And as the costs come down, I think it's important to look at those as possible ways of doing things. And of course, the idea is that more and more artificial intelligence is growing faster and faster. People like Ray Kurzweil thinks that our artificial intelligence will merge with human minds by 2045. We'll have to see whether that happens. But what it means is that if you have an artificial intelligence monitoring your health in real time, they can see, oh, here's a problem that's coming up, and then we can use some kind of advanced technology in order to head off the possible healthcare problem. So some of these, and again, it's very exciting what is happening right now in technology and what it can do. And so, as people who are advocates, I want you to expand your imagination to look at what technology can do today. Look at what it might be able to do in the future. Look at how it can be applied in the area of healthcare and longevity. Maybe it can apply, certain ways in, say, Lagos, Nigeria, which is a very large, of course, very populous city. Maybe different ways in more rural areas. That's what an entrepreneur is. An entrepreneur is somebody who looks for finds a need, sees that there's a need, and then pulls together the factors that can deal with that problem. And so I want all of you as advocates to think about that sort of thing. We have a saying that says, think outside of the box. Don't just think of, well, this is the way it's always been done. It can be done in different ways. And again, the fact that I'm having this conversation with you, this was not possible 20, 30 years ago, right? 20 or 30 years ago, 20 years ago to be exact, nobody has what I'm holding in my hand. This is a modern smartphone. This is an Apple phone. There are Samsung phones. There are others that the Chinese make. They are many, many times more powerful than the original phone that came out 20 years ago. And there's an analyst in Japan who did a calculation, and he said that if you wanted all the capacities in this device that I'm holding in my hand right now in the early 1980s, it would cost about $100 million, and it would take a lot of energy, and it would be 14 feet tall and so forth. The point is that everybody has literally $1 million in their pockets if they of value if you actually have a modern smartphone. So if you take a look at what's happened in the area of telecommunications and information, the fact that we're having this wonderful conversation right now, think of that dynamism in healthcare, health span, and longevity. And as advocates, that's what you should be thinking about in terms of what you are doing in your professions, what you are doing in your any activities, but especially inspiring people and showing them, hey, guess what? This is what is possible. I'll mention, by the way, that there are issues about how you leverage advocacy. And I've already mentioned, if you're actually working on the ground as somebody who's trying to bring health care and health span and so forth to a particular region. I've talked about how to use technology. I'll obviously mention in education, and I know Osa Nakachi and our organization is very big on that. What you see is a lot of times in societies, certainly here in the United States, what is happening today, I can trace back to, for better or unfortunately for worse, what happened in the universities and the schools 20 and 30 years ago. So what you do in the schools and in your educational institutions today is going to be reflected in what happens in people's attitudes and the culture 10 years, 20 years from now. So education is absolutely crucial in every way to longevity and advocacy. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit, and let's see, I've got a little bit more time, I think, here. This is a little bit of a sensitive topic, but you can't really have the kind of health span and longevity that you need if you don't have a certain kind of economy and a certain, oops, a little bit noisy there, okay, and a certain kind of governmental setup. And I'm going to show you a couple of slides here if I can get my iPad to work. I'm just going to hold these up because I came up with an idea in the late 1980s and early 1990s for an index of economic freedom. The idea, I wanted to look at countries and come up with objective measures and be able to say, well, if you want to have a prosperous country, here are the factors involved, things like tax rates, investments, free trade, all of those kind of things. And I want to see what the correlation is. And I'm going to hold up here the most recent index of economic freedom. And what you're going to see here is the top graph is basically points showing economic liberty and prosperity. And you can see the correlation there, that the freer a country is in terms of economy, the more prosper it is. And on the bottom, you can see here the GDP per capita of the freest countries are all the way on the one side, and they're big, that's very high. The less free countries are all the way down at the bottom, and they're the poorest countries. The correlation between economic liberty and prosperity is about as clear as you can get. But here's the other interesting factor. One of the factors that you find in the Index of Economic Freedom is corruption. Meaning, do you have a government that's fair, that protects private property rights, that has an independent judiciary, and the like? And that's one of the things, I'm sorry to say, that most African countries do very, very poorly on. And I was going to show Nigeria here, but I could show most of the other African countries. And even though they have entrepreneurial people there, it's very hard for them to get anything done. And corruption, institutionalized corruption in the government, is a factor that keeps countries from prospering. But it also, and remember, without prosperity, how are you going to do all these wonderful things? How are you going to get the technology and so forth? But again, it also means that first of all, it drives away the best people. I mentioned at the beginning of our talk that we have a lot of doctors and healthcare providers right here where I live in the state of Maryland, who are from African countries. Nigeria is a big one in this area, but I've had a woman doctor from Rwanda treated my mother some years ago. We had one who treated my father who was from Kenya. And so the problem is, if you have these dysfunctional governments, what happens to the best people? And especially the best healthcare people? Well, they come to the United States, or maybe they go to Britain or some other place like that, and they do very well. So I think that what you have to do as advocates is understand that you're not only helping to make your countries healthier, to have people live longer and to live healthier. Oops, something making a noise there. But also that you are going to be the vanguard of changing the system, because again, it's the system that holds back a lot of the best and the brightest in your countries. And again, if you're discouraged from from even trying to have these entrepreneurial activities because your government is in the way or whatever, then that's going to be very bad. I want to mention one other thing, because a gentleman who I know and I've known for many decades, and he was just appointed the prime minister of the country of Peru, by the way. I actually met him again in the United States here when he was here to get an award. His name is Hernando de Soto. And I want to tell you something about Hernando de Soto. He is a Peruvian, and he did a book called The Other Path, El Otro Sendero, in Spanish. And what he did was he looked at his own country of Peru and asked, why is our country so poor and so destitute? And the healthcare system, by the way, I won't even describe it, but you can imagine how bad it was, especially when I was visiting him in the late 1980s. And what he did was on the ground research to ask, why is it so bad? Because the people here are just as entrepreneurial as people in Africa or the United States or anywhere else. And what he found was this. If you wanted to set up a business in Lima, Peru, with 2 sewing machines, that's all, okay? And you wanted to do it only paying bribes to the government where you absolutely had to, it took 289 days to get a license to set up 2 sewing machines. If you wanted to buy a piece of abandoned land outside of Lima, Peru, they had to break up the research into bits and pieces because it would take I think it was 12 years and 9 months, something like that, to get a license or a piece of land outside of Lima. It's basically desert land anyway. The point is that if you were a regular person in Lima, Peru, there's no way you could prosper honestly. And so what happened, of course, is you had huge informal sectors. 80 or 90% of public transportation in Lima was black market, people with buses that were technically illegal, but everyone knew where they were going to come and so forth. You had huge settlements where you'd had self-defense forces, private ones setting up so people could go in and put up houses and things of that nature. I bring that up because De Soto also wrote a book called The Mystery of Capital, where he worked with Egyptians and people in many other countries to show how to make an economy more prosperous. And again, that is economic liberty. And again, I mention that because even though this is a discussion about longevity, I cannot see in my own work and in the examples you see in the world, how you can have health span, longevity, healthy people, if you don't have some honest government, some form of economic liberty so people can benefit from their entrepreneurial efforts. And of course, I'll mention one other thing that seems obvious, but it's worth mentioning. If a lot of people are sick, if a lot of people are in misery, if a lot of people are dying too early, right? Or if they're handicapped and maybe they live long, but it's not a very healthy life, they're not going to be very productive. They're not going to be able to earn a living for themselves. They're not going to be contributing to the economy of the country. Health span and longevity is really about the whole country and about the economic prosperity of a country. And also, of course, there's the issue of the money. Here in the United States, for example, the healthcare sector is something like $4.5 trillion. And lots of it is waste and inefficiency. And that means that money that could go to other things, education or whatever, is being spent needlessly on broken sick care systems. I don't call them healthcare systems. I call them sick care systems because that's really what they are. And so that, I think this underlies the importance of another thing as an advocate you have to do. You have to look at the institutions. I mentioned government as an obvious institution, but this again gets to the point of looking at what kind of institutions do you have in African countries. In the United States, for example, we have institutions that are, for example, organizations of doctors, professional organizations. They put on conferences, they publish journals and things like that. And perhaps they're well-meaning, but one of the problems is that they have mindsets quite often looking in the past and the old ways of thinking rather than new ways of thinking. And this can be very, very deadly. For example, when the AIDS epidemic first struck in the United States in the early 1980s, researchers knew that the virus could be passed along through blood transfusions rather than just sexual contact. However, the institutions, the professional organizations didn't want to get that information out to doctors, to hospitals, and the like. There was some concern that if people thought that blood transfusions could pass along the AIDS virus, then perhaps they wouldn't donate blood, or perhaps they would be reluctant to get transfusions. Because it took some years before doctors and hospitals were screening for HIV. Hundreds and probably thousands, actually thousands of people died. Something like 12,000 people with hemophilia, which is, of course, the bleeding disease that you probably know, contracted that disease or that and died. I could give you a lot of other examples of where professional organizations that are meant to be, helping doctors and so forth do better, in fact, are what we call sclerotic. They're backwards looking, they're set in their ways. And you as advocates have to be the ones to come along. And as hopefully some of you trained to be doctors and to be researchers, you're the ones who are going to have to come along and say, you have to think differently. You have to look at the new technologies. You have to embrace the new technologies. You have to look at new ways of doing things. You have to make your professional organizations, your professional journals, your professional meetings future looking and entrepreneurial. Again, I could give other examples of how this is a problem. And delivery systems as well. I mentioned delivery systems already, that, if you're in a smaller town or city, you don't have big hospitals, there are ways to do it with technology where you can get around the need for those big hospitals. And for those of you who look at the Western countries, I just did a chapter for a book, and I'm happy to send you the copy of it, about longevity and technology. And what I do in that book is I noted that if you take a look at industrial countries like Canada, France, Great Britain, as well as the United States, you will see that we have very bad delivery systems. In Canada, healthcare is free, but in the sense you get what you paid for, because it might take a year to get an appointment for a specialty procedure. And so a lot of Canadians simply travel to the United States, or sorry, to the United States to get their procedure done, because you can get it quicker here, even if you pay out of pocket. Some countries specialize in medical tourism, where it's cheaper to literally fly to another country to get a treatment, because the distribution system or the treatment system in those countries are very bad. So you have to be aware of the problems that we have in the Western countries so that you don't duplicate the wrong thing. Anyway, I've gone on a little bit about this. I'm sorry for rambling. I had to put some of this together kind of quickly, but I want to come back to the whole notion of advocacy and longevity. You all are the avant-garde. You all are the entrepreneurs. You're the ones who are going to be the doctors, the researchers, hopefully the political leaders, the academics, the teachers. You're going to be the exemplars. You're not only going to do the great things you're going to do, but you're going to be the exemplars for your whole societies, whether it's Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, you name it. You're going to be the leaders. You're going to be the ones who are going to raise the understanding of people that they can be empowered to take their own health into their own hands, that they don't have to worry as much about being sick, about seeing children sicken and die, parents dying far too early, to enjoy life more. You're going to be the ones who raise their consciousness about what is possible. You're going to be the ones who show how technology today is going to be able, you're going to be able to bring about this better world, this better longevity and health span much quicker, in a sense, than it took centuries here in the Western world and in the industrialized world to do. So I am very excited about the prospects of Africa. I'm very happy to work with Osa Nakachi and Brenda and many of the others involved. And I want to just mention finally that any of you who want to contact me personally with an email, you can go to EHUDGINS at humanachievementalliance.org. You can go to my Gmail, which is Edward, Edward, Lee, Lee, Hudgins, Hudgins, at gmail.com. I have a Gmail address. It might be easier to type that in than humanachievementalliance.org. I have a WhatsApp connection as well. I am on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. And I really am excited to, first of all, help you and to learn from you. I don't know everything, believe it or not. I try to be modest. And so I'm really looking forward to any questions you might have and to any follow-up that you might have. And I want to thank again Osa Nakachi, who is just, you want to talk about an exemplar, you're looking at one right now, okay? It's Osa Nakachi right here. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. And I look forward to any questions and any follow-up.
That was massive, Prof. Thank you so much. Yeah, let me get this going quickly. This is something that you've been doing for us ever since, and I cannot thank you a lot. There is something that is so frustrating in this part of the world. And before I yield the mic for questions, there are some important comments. I think I needed to say this, in South Africa is the most advanced country currently in Africa when it comes to healthcare. And you see their system very supportive and very supportive of any novel idea. When we wanted to do the International Longevity Summit 2020, when we moved it from South Africa, I decided to bring it to Nigeria. The South African government said, no, OC, you must not do this. We had an who is unmuting and speaking at the same time. So we had an MOU. Later they said, okay, we must sign an MOU not to move the conference out of South Africa. You see them organizing things like Meetings Africa. They're intentional about their health. I think one of the meetings I had with the Minister of Health was that they want to position South Africa as the destination for medical tourism in Africa. And in the meeting, they're even talking about, imagine Nigeria spending a lot of money. They did an analysis of the amount of money Nigeria pumped to UK for studies. So they are looking for a way to push, since South African university ranks higher than most European universities. They want Nigerians to be coming there, and then they are preparing Nigeria as to have Nigerian patients to come to South Africa for medical tourism. Of course, we know that Cape Town is the leading when it comes to aesthetic health. Most of the aesthetic patients, all these musicians, content creators, and all that goes to South Africa for those procedures. So, and I'm here thinking in every conference, what is the fate of Nigeria? It was in that same meeting that I realized that most of the things like gene sequencing, like enzo gene sequencing and proper through that testing to know the biological age of people, the most standard company that they use is through diagnostics. And you know, some other agencies, Afrolongevity is partnering with them, but I realized how so accurate True Diagnostics were. So I had a meeting with True Diagnostics. They were hesitant, but I have to press on using those in my network like Aubrey and Co to have this conversation. And they promised to come to Nigeria. We put in money to get those kits into Nigeria. It would have been the first in Africa, you know. I plan to donate one set to the East and then one to College of Medicine, University of Lagos, since we have MOU with them. But you see, most people, even those in the universities in Nigeria, they play politics with everything. They are not serious. Those you see things like teaching hospitals. There are a lot of bureaucratic bottlenecks for you to even get through them, to assess them and give them help what they need to progress and take the to bridge the longevity divide. So after everything, we decided to get these kits, and these kits cost more than $80,000. So the basic, and the plan was to train some healthcare professionals like nurses and doctors on how to use them. Guess what? The immigration office, it's custom, the immigration, they stopped them. They got to Lagos, Ikeja. I don't know if you heard Aubrey say something regards to that. Aubrey was very mad because they had to return Jasmine too. Jasmine of Rejuve AI came and they returned because Jasmine couldn't understand the language of bribe. So I called the immigration, a customer immigration officer. I called one. I said, please go check so and so persons for me. They left. This man told me on phone, and I was with the vice chancellor of Lagos State University, that something that you could have just given us $25 each for your speakers, your delegates, and then you let them go back. Because they didn't tell me, they didn't inform me, but you see the kind of systems and structures we have.
Yeah.
So these are the things. There are a whole lot of nuances. It is not all about passion. Like most people criticize me on Facebook. Most people criticize me when I say things. I think there was a medical doctor that was saying, what have I done? It's only to talk about things. What have I done? But I have been in this space for close to 10 years doing a whole lot. But it's not about competition. I realized that I can't do this alone. That's why we started this movement, so that a lot of persons here can also join forces together for us to make this happen. And there is also something that Dr. Nyok also said in the comment section. I don't know if he can talk about it briefly or pose it as a question, then you address everything together. He did mention about religion. Dr. Nyok.
Okay.
Yes. Oh, there he is.
Okay, thank you very much, OC. What I meant by that is that first, the continent is very religious. That's number one. Secondly, immediately we begin to talk about religion. The country is very religious, but it is not theological. Let me note that point. It is very religious, but our religion is not theologically laden, as it were. So immediately we begin to talk about religion, reason goes on a holiday. So in within the context where you have a continent that is largely religious, in fact, notoriously religious, if I were to quote JS and BT, and then you want a group of people to make advocacy, it becomes challenging. Yeah, I don't know how you can respond to that, because it becomes very, very challenging, because now longevity and Afro longevity, as it were, is saying let us live healthily. Let us talk about health care rather than sick care, just like you noted. But religion thrives on also sick care, because we have a group of religious leaders who also pose that as people who have spiritual abilities to cure ailments. If you remove that industry, because that's a very big industry for these religious exploiters. If you remove that industry, that means certain religions will crumble. You know, it will crumble. It's no more. It's a capitalist system. You know, hiding under the cloak of religion. You know, so I don't know how you respond that within the call for advocacy. Thank you.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I didn't get into theology, obviously. I mean, I know, first of all, of course, there's Christian and there's Muslim, you know, in Africa, depending on which country, there's, you know, more of one or the or the other. And there are what we call over here traditional religions or practices. And for many of them, it's, well, here's how you deal with your health. It's not through what they might call Western ways, right, with medications and so forth. And by the way, there are problems with Western ways, I want to say, okay? We tend to emphasize here, I think, too much. Well, you have a problem, you come in and you're sick because it's a sick care system rather than a preventive system. We're going to give you a pill and see how that works. And there's a place for that, obviously, but we should focus more on prevention, which would mean a better diet and things of that sort. But we fought some of those battles in, you know, the what are now the industrialized countries. And we still, unfortunately, have certain religious sects in the United States that shun modern medicine and things of that sort. There's one called the Christian Scientists, for example. And if you basically say, well, we're in favor of healthy lifestyles, well, I'd say that's fine for everybody, whether you're religious or not. But I mean, I think ultimately what you do is you have to appeal to people and say, look, if you don't want to get sick and die, there are proven ways of doing that. And technology today offers even better solutions than in the past. And so I think you ultimately have to appeal to, here's what we can do. If you don't want to see your children getting sick and die, you know, you have to look at all the options. And if traditional, these traditionalist religions, is what I'll call them, say, well, part of it is living a clean life. Well, I'm 100% in favor of living a clean life and having a better diet. Those are good things, and more of us should embrace them. But I think that's how you have to approach the system as advocates. And again, there are more of us, the more people we have on this discussion right now who become leaders and exemplars and so forth. I think you'll see some of that sort of thing, I hope, fading. But it's a very good point. Oops, I think we have another question there.
So time for questions. And the background, you had wanted to ask a question. So let's take the live questions before the ones in the comments section. Questions. In the background, are you there?
Hello, good evening.
Okay, good evening.
Okay, my name is Ifeanyi Okeke. I'm an IT officer for TAFFD. I have a critical question, but is based on the technological aspects of longevity. My question is based on the area you mentioned on the entrepreneurship aspect of technology. So I have some concerns because at TAFFD and Afrolongevity, we are actually coming up with a lot of innovations for the African community. So my question now is, how can health data, because of how critical this aspect of longevity is, it has to do with human medical data. So how can health data be effectively managed through technology, given the importance? For example, I know how corrupt, sorry to use that word, how Nigeria is when it comes to some capitalists or individuals wanting to get what they want by all means, you know. And when it comes to technology, for example, if a Nigerian owns a particular health technology, you know, how can we manage the informations there when we know truly well that our politicians can decide to wake up anytime and politicize that particular platform, and as well they can just, since they have access to your medical history, they can as well do things that will trigger a kind of illness or something that can actually send the person to an early grave. So that is one. Then another one, you know, what mechanisms, you know, should we ensure trust, you know, in these technological tools? You know, this is not something, I don't think there is health tech has started excelling as much as we have financial fintech in Africa. You know, in Africa, everyone cares about fintech. They just want to make the quick money, and that's all they care about. So, what mechanisms can we use to ensure this trust in these technology tools? You know, and what do you think is the ethical implications that arise from this, from the use of all these technologies? You know, and to whom should we individuals entrust our health data to? That's my few questions. Thank you.
Wow, that is a very good question and would require a longer answer than I can give here. I've written some things about that recently, and I think I put my email, and certainly Osa Nakachi, Osi has my contact information, so we can perhaps discuss this one-on-one in a Zoom or online somehow. Health data, I'll mention first of all, is going to be crucial with, as you probably know, with AI in the future. It's having all of that data that an AI will look at and be able right now, in fact, to try to predict what kind of health measures mean a certain ailment will come up or whatever. And I could give you examples of that, and I've written about those kind of examples. Health data is going to be incredibly important with AIs. In fact, there's a good book. Let me see if I have it here. Here's an interesting book, ChatGPT MD, and it's by a guy named Robert Pearl, who is the head of Kaiser Permanente, which is a major healthcare organization here in the United States. And he co-wrote his book with ChatGPT, by the way. And he talks in this book about some of the issues you bring up. Trust is also absolutely important. You know, my view of governments is not a very high view, especially in terms of their ethics. And so do I want to trust all of my data to the government? No, really, I don't. One of the things, by the way, that Apple, that makes this phone and the device I'm on right now, have tried to highlight is that they're very strict about privacy and about keeping your data private. Now, as I say, there's a balance here because in the future, massive data is going to be necessary for AIs. And we have a big controversy over here about building data centers and how much more energy is going to be needed for data centers to accommodate the AI and all the benefits that they're going to bring. You're also right about this comes down to a moral and ethical issue, is about those who want to simply get quick money through fintech or crypto or whatever, versus those who want to put in the hard work and the long-term work into the research that's going to allow us to live longer, healthier lives. And that's something where, for example, I would have to look at the different countries. Right now, I can talk about the problems in the United States and why sometimes there's a penalty if I decide I want to make money with long-term research. But if I want to do something else, I can make money and do it very quickly, but it's, and it'll make somebody wealthy. That's nice. It'll provide some goods and services. But what about long-term benefits? And maybe we could even do a whole separate session on exactly this at some point in the future, maybe in our next round, OC. because I've written a lot on these kind of things and looking at systems. And I'd have to basically offline maybe talk about your specific system and some of the things I would recommend. And by the way, when you talk about capitalism, I make the distinction between the word capitalism and what I'm really talking about is free markets. And in a free market, the government doesn't say, well, I like this business, so I'm going to help this business with a handout or with tariffs to protect them. But I don't like this business because I don't like the brother-in-law of the person who runs it. And so I'm going to put penalties on them. That's not real freedom, free markets or capitalism. That's what sometimes is called mercantilism or corporatism or whatever. And I'm opposed to that. I believe that, if a business can make it on its own, great, but they shouldn't do it because a government is penalizing another innovator to help this business or this person over there.
Okay.
And and please contact me offline if you want to. I'm happy to talk to you.
Yes, I'm going to, because maybe it's part of the project, since you are also in charge of our future studies at TAFFD. There are also other things, because there are products we are trying to roll out. There are frictions in Africa that we're trying to solve with a fusion of medtech, health tech, and biotech. So we are building properly. So I think you remember my presentation at the Gen4 Summit, where I talked about property rights in the age of digital inheritance. One of the things that I feel that is very problematic in Africa when it comes to health data, and I had this conversation with GlycanAge. I had this conversation with True Diagnostics and Rejuve AI and some other biotech companies that are into these measurements of biodata and what have you. When they reach out to me to have a conversation about this, they always tell me the challenge. Africa is genetically diverse, and we are not like some other people from across the world. So, and our biodiversity also influences our genetic diversity, right? So to really have a more coherent processing of African data becomes problematic. So they need to keep on trying until the system masters it very well. And we are also careful because you can't just come and take African data. These are the things that I'm trying to work out, because it happened during the pre-colonial and the earlier tech time, even in the biotech model. So there are some critical questions and policies that we are trying to put out in the longevity space, and then submit it to some governments who are serious, because the gatekeepers are not even interested in some of all these things. From the back door, in a continent where people don't even take what do we call it, proper data collection seriously. And I find it very problematic when I go to health conferences, let's say in India, and I realize that most of the people that says that they own pharmaceuticals in Nigeria and some African countries, especially West Africa, what they do is white labeling. And they just pay the institutions, just get the medication without checking the bioequivalence of that medication in the country. You are answering that you own a pharmaceutical company, and the institution is not even taking account of this. I've attended several interviews stressing on the fact that we should make it a policy to deregulate open drug market. Close it down and allow local pharmaceutical companies to open a retail shop so that we can track our problems. So this fragmented information will help us to have a more coherent data set. And we cannot allow strangers to, even, I know we have data problem in Africa, but it will be a disaster for strangers to give us our health data or data sets, or to control the data sets. we need to start harvesting it. But the support is not even there from the grassroots, because I think that is the friction that we want to solve with Afrolongevity and with other things that has to do with checking people that have lived over 100 years and 120 super centenarian and centenarians. And we are doing the studies. We did it in the last session. The first cohort got the background information because we got an expert in that field to talk about it. But we are still trying to look out for people that are interested so that we have more advanced studies and training in that niche, to avoid people waking up, especially in Ebonyi State. Someone will wake up and write 180 years on posters. It's common there. So we need to just get it right. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, that's interesting because, for example, in this country, there's an ailment called sickle cell anemia, which mainly affects Black people. And it's a terrible ailment, and it's genetic based. And I think it was using CRISPR-Cas9 or a CAR-T, I can't remember which one. We now have figured out how to control it and essentially not completely cure it. But it's something, of course, that's very genetic and specific to people with, African genes, as opposed to like, a Brit or something like that. And so even here, there's becoming a greater recognition that our genetic makeup matters. And it's not that, all genetic makeups are not the same. And that's where, again, I think that we'll get more sophistication with, the more we have genetic sequencing. Researchers are going to appreciate, hey, wait a minute, I can't just take it all together. There's this group that tends to have these issues or, advantages, health advantages in those. And so you're absolutely correct about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you had wanted to ask a question on the sickle cell anemia, it just had to do with a kind of mutation from malaria. It's not just
right.
It's not just common, and the genotype thing, you can't find it in countries that doesn't have malaria, or that malaria is not endemic. So it's just some of the problematics, and I'm also encouraging people to look at how to treat malaria properly. If you are treating malaria more than 2 times in a year, there is a problem. You need to get a protocol and to ensure that you don't suffer malaria, because it's rewriting your genetic codes, your DNAs and all that, and the alteration keep going. But any little thing, most people are saying, oh, they need to treat malaria every month. Some persons are treating every 2 months. Some persons every 3 months. It's problematic. So you need help. And if you are depending on this system that profits from keeping you sick, you're not going to get well at all. Okay, you can ask your question.
By the way, I just want to say, I love what you just said. You have a sick care system. We need incentives for people to and professionals to keep us healthy to begin with. And I wrote about that in the book, in the chapter I just mentioned for another book. And anyone who's interested in that, can contact me on that.
Okay, thank you so much. Your question before we wrap it up.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Edward and Jim. I must say I like the artistry on your desk to start with. That's beautiful.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I got this in 1990, I think that's when I got this, but it's just, I keep it around all the time.
Okay. You've been, though I joined, let me say I was a little bit busier, but when I joined, I could figure out that you were talking about things that are related with AI and the rest. And this you are discussing with a generation that is info compliant. Now, my question is coming to to bringing it down to people that are not really literate with certain things? How do we bring this advocacy down to people that are not literate like we are? I don't know whether you get me, because there are some persons not minding that we should be in the 22nd century, like I used to say, or 21st century. But there are some persons that you mention certain things within their scope, and they will be like, "What are you trying to say?" Not minding the age we are in. How do we bring down these advocacies to people of lower grades, people that are less tech inclined, to bring this this message, this advocacy down? That's my question. I don't know what I get.
Yeah, no, I understand. And I spoke a little bit about this earlier. I would say a couple of things. First of all, and I wrote about this in the chapter I just did for a book by that's edited by Ilya Stamler, who's the head of the International Longevity Alliance. Ossie knows him very well as also. What's happening is younger people more and more are understanding technology. And so as generations age and as sadly older people die out, people who are maybe poorer and don't understand technology and so forth, there's going to be more and more of the population, young people who now are more involved in technology, who will understand it. And I look at some data in the paper I just did that shows just that. It shows that younger people are more open to, for example, tracking their health with a smartwatch or things of that nature. Or I have my Aura ring on as well. I think that's a very good tracker, so forth. So there's a generational thing that's going to just happen in and of itself. But the other thing, and again, I'm looking at the United States. I have more experience, obviously, with the United States. But part of it is that as culture changes at the top level and as institutions change, then people, you might say at the lower level, I don't want to put them down because they're human beings with dignity, as we all should have. But then they start to, if not get it, understand these things technically, they kind of understand, well, things are changing and it looks like this is the best way to go in terms of if I want to be healthy. And it is a mindset thing as well. I spoke at the beginning of this lecture about caring for yourself, about valuing yourself and seeing yourself as a as somebody who who deserves the best in life, and that includes health. And so if you take your health seriously, then you're going to look for these things. And again, as we do what we're doing literally right here, in years to come, we're going to be changing the cultures in our countries. We're going to be changing the institutions so that the institutions are going to be putting more of an emphasis, for example, on being healthy and giving an incentive, for example, for healthcare physicians to be preventive. There's a thing called capitation as opposed to fee for services that I talk about in one of the papers that or the chapter I just did. And then that's how it's going to flow down, as it were. Some people call in the wealth area trickle-down theory, and they say that that's a bad thing, meaning that, well, if everybody up at the top gets rich, then eventually it'll trickle down to the poor people. But that's not what's been happening lately, because as I mentioned, 20 years ago, nobody had one of these things. Now, 90-some% of people in industrialized advanced countries have a smartphone that are so far ahead of what came out 20 years ago. And it happened very quickly. And so what I'm looking at is how do you get that technology, that dynamism, in our economy for healthcare? And again, I think that that's where, if you come to the United States, almost even the poorest people tend to have one of these things. Okay, that's how it got down to that level. And then once something like this gets down to that level, then we can say, well, how would you like to take this thing and make sure that you don't get sick? Or one of these things or one of these things. Again, I'm just kind of talking off the top of my head, but I could put together a better answer for you if you want to email me, and I can, give you something a little more systemic with some data attached to it.
Thank you so much, Professor Edward. If I may, I think if you want to start a movement or a vision, you should have a clear roadmap. So when we launched Afrolongevity, I coined the term Afrolongevity, and I sent it to Professor Edward was the first person I sent it to. He made enormous contribution, and he sent it to me back. And I started working on this thing before we launched it in 2022. Now, the thing is that there is a reason why we are having this conversation. In Africa, we've realized that knowledge transfer used to be the problem. So now I said in the strategy that the vision is, and the strategy is to bridge the longevity divides in the continent. And with that, we can improve the quality of the life of people, which will now help us close the life expectancy gap in the continent. Because Nigeria is the lowest globally when it comes to life expectancy. And it is so disastrous for those who were born during COVID and all that. In 2022, the life expectancy, if we don't do anything, it's going to be problematic. So now we are having these programs for everybody here to become a trainer. It's a kind of train the trainer sort of things. Then you can take this program down to the chapter you belong, because we're going to have a national chapter. There are people from different African countries. We're going to have a state chapter. We're going to have a campus chapter for this Afro-longevity movement. So each state can organize programs around their states. They can organize outreach programs in villages, because if you are able to understand this in English, you can translate it in your local languages and dialects to the people there. The longevity or healthy longevity doesn't start from the pharmaceutical companies or the hospital. It starts from your home. And I've said this severally. Most of the people that want to make it a thing of the elite, I said we have what it takes to beat to enter the longevity economy more than the United States. You can argue as much as you can. We are closer to our biodiversity, bioavailability, our plants, and everything is not so much adulterated as it is in the US. When you travel around and you eat something from your hometown, it tastes differently from what we have in Europe and America. So we are more closer to nature. We have better phytochemicals and all that in our plants. So we don't need to even, these things like GMO is problem, will create more problem to ourselves. We need to understand why we are here, get the information, and share the information with those outside here. Because unless we are able to take this information home, then our aim is defeated. So we must learn how to translate this, and language becomes key. That's why at times I try to integrate Igbo in my posts, because that is the one I can do better. I try to communicate in such a way that people understand, try to bring in jokes. So we must learn how to take this thing either to the churches, to change it, to disambiguate the minds of people, to change perspective. Most people are so dependent on supplements. Most people are so dependent on a whole lot. So we must try to start changing their mind. We won't be discouraged. And most persons will not take us serious, but the few that takes the information will make use of it. Seriously. So that is why we are here. The education advocacy, we have education, which is training the trainer, knowledge transfer. We have advocacy and outreach. We have R&D, research and development. We write research papers, and there are 3 papers that we must deal with. From Exvia, I've written the skeleton. Most of the development aspect is the one that Okeke Fani is heading in building the blockchain. We are building a blockchain. We are doing so much to make sure that we connect the right pharmaceutical industry to the people, to avoid this idea of buying fake medication in Nigeria. So it's you have to look at the thing and find a way to solve it, so we cannot complain ourselves to the best. And another thing is that most of the nutritionists in Africa, I said this severally, they were taught with Western curriculum. Somebody will come to the hospital and they are giving you American standard dietary plans in Nigeria, when you don't have American standard of hospital that we deal with the problem that comes with American standard of disease. You know, the American standard dietary plan causes American standard of disease, and they have a system that reacts to it. You know, these are the things that we need to. So most persons want to challenge. I say, you don't even know your genetic and evolutionary nutrition. You don't regard your cultural diet. You don't regard your phytochemicals. You don't regard your herbs. You want to eat burger. You want to eat all these things that causes problems to yourself. And then most persons will make salt the scapegoat when sugar is the problem. So we need to start, because our parents and our various villages are becoming addictive to some of all this boxed food. You know, boxed food, people are becoming lazy. People just want to buy ultra-processed food. Things, I have to buy something that you need to convince me that it is food. Is that not false marketing? You package something, you now advertise it to convince me that, hey, OC, this is food, you must buy it. So with shelf life. So sorry for wasting your time, Prof. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate. I don't know if we still have more questions and concern. Okay, Jamike, please, you can ask the question and you'll be the one to give us the closing remark for the day.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Professor. You know, I've been a secret follower of you for ages now, because I come across your teachings in the Tekedia Institute when you talked about age of singularity. You know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm so happy. Yeah.
There we go.
I was so excited listening to you, and your insights are so wonderful. Thank you very much. People will have a lot here. And this is Harvard standard education we are getting for free. Thank you, OC. Thank you very much. Yep. I'm not joking. What we are getting here for free is Harvard standard, more than Harvard itself. It's more than Harvard. So I think what OC mentioned that is very challenging is the age information gap, and the other person mentioned the problem of religion. And in your view, how can one bridge that gap to be able to get this information across as an advocate? What is the do you have a plan or a map, or have you ever, how were you able to do it in your own side, and how can we translate that to our own system?
Well, as I talked about this a little earlier, and partly it's know your audience. And because, you know, we were talking earlier about when I talk about Africa, it's like talking about Asia or the Americas or whatever. There's a great difference between South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, and the like. And within each country, you have you know, different. You have small villages and small towns. You have big cities like Lagos and the like. And then you ask, who are you trying to influence first? Experts, young people, which I assume a lot of them are on this event right here, and the like. And And so you really, and I kind of do that in this country with the work that I do. And I look for, what is my audience and what am I going to be saying to them? And you have to understand what are the interests of your audience? What are the values that you can tweak, so to speak? And so, for example, I don't know what particular religious beliefs we're talking about, but you can look at them, and if you find something that is important, that you think is a good thing, then you say, you know what, this is a value to you. Here's how you can make this even better. If, whether it's diet or whether, I think, I'm trying to remember, Osi might know this better than I. There's a phrase, I think, in Christianity that the body is the temple of the soul, or something like that. And so if you believe that, well, you should be taking care of this temple, right? So that might be one way to do this. But you'd have to look really at exactly what the community is that you're advocating for, and what do you want to happen in the long term. Where's the leverage going to be? And again, it might be, for example, education, I think, is absolutely crucial. You talked about how do you get the information to people, and that's where you really have leverage in schools and in universities, because then those people are going to basically go and teach in other schools. They're going to be professionals. They're going to be getting the information out there. And again, I'm not sure how the media works in some of these countries. I know how the media works in our countries. And again, even there, maybe we can talk. I'm happy, by the way, to communicate offline. We can do a private Zoom or whatever, because communications has changed radically, certainly in the developed world. 30, 40 years ago, most areas had 3 television stations, and we had radio, and that was it. Now, a lot of the media, those kind of media, are failing because I can get 24-hour information through dozens of portals. And then there's a whole issue that we talked about earlier. Earlier question was about trust. That's a serious problem that we do have, by the way, with technology. If I go on Facebook, I was just looking at maybe doing a paper or something on just how much misinformation we have on Facebook, websites and so forth. So that's a very important, it's a good portal, but it's so much bad stuff. How do you stand out as the trusted person or the trusted organization, so people go to you because they know your stuff is accurate and not simply you're making stuff up.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and as I say, you feel free to contact me offline, because I love having these discussions, and I learn so much from listening to you guys. Okay.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. Oh, so you said I should do closing remark, right?
Sorry, we have one more question from someone before we go.
Okay.
Sorry. One more question.
Okay.
Oops. Yeah, I saw a hand up. Can you ask your question, please?
I don't see it. Okay, yeah, I don't see it.
Okay, so before that, I just want to stress on something that is very important. When in 2023, we launched a very important, okay, the hand is still up. Once I'm done, you ask a question, please. If it got something to do with the malaria, you can reach out to me on Facebook, please. In 2023, we launched the International Longevity Summit Africa, and it became the premier longevity meeting in the continent. But Africans don't take it seriously. This year, because of the pressure of me and the gaps, because now after being elected to the International Longevity Alliance, there are mandates, there are things that I need to do. I need to deliver my pooling unit. If it's in Nigerian police, they say deliver your pooling unit. I have to deliver my pooling unit. So the continent, we are really, really bad. And I decided to do 3 events this year. So I decided to bring one home the one of Nigeria, Imo State University, I need people to really help. We need to really make it a big event. The politics is hard. The big farmers are really playing the politics the hard way. In Europe, the biggest longevity conference is the AARUD, which, by the way, Professor Edward, it was canceled late minutes yesterday. The news. So I spoke with Professor Alex of in silico medicine, and they had to change. They've changed the venue today. There is a news that just dropped 2 minutes ago while we were in the meeting, and that is it. That is for Europe. That's the biggest. And then when you come to America, the biggest longevity meeting is a Rat Feast, the revolution against aging, and I think that's where Edward got his Afrolongevity, the coffee, the African coffee, and other things that we sent across. So, but in Africa, we just need to do our thing. And for me, the vision is for us to find a way to sit with our local way. We need to package. I think the South African president would like, you guys need to package this thing. Oh, see, there is so much that you need to do. You need to package this thing. So we need to, I can't do it alone. That's why you here need to make the Nigerian event a success. And for those who can, for some reason, I decided to make the this event for free. You just have to pay your flights and then your accommodation. You can ask Professor Edward about the prices of other longevity events from across the world. In fact, the one that Peter Demetriades organizes, the VIP ticket is $70,000. It's quite expensive. And to some, it's just like 5,000, 7,000 for VIP. Some is 500 for regular delegates, because there are a whole lot that you're going to learn. But here we're trying to make it affordable, but because of the situation before us, we've decided to make that of Addis and that of South Africa free. The one of Nigeria is not even up to $15. It's $20,000. 20,000 naira, sorry. 20,000 naira, 20,000 naira. I have to say. So it's not up to $15. So that is it. So we just have to keep going and just find a way. There is no sponsor from anywhere. I'm saying this is life. So I'm saying this in this open community. For now, everything is coming from my pockets. So when people just wake up and they start saying things, I just look at them and laugh. So please, your support is needed, especially when it comes to the activation. We have people to talk to. We have people to partner to make sure we deliver our polling units. Thank you so much. My brother Jami, you can close this section.
Oh, what an honor. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone that came around, more especially to our faculty, Professor Edward Huggins. We are grateful for your knowledge and impact. And thank you, our convener and our chief priest in Afrolongevity. I call him the chief priest of Afrolongevity. OC, God bless you and your team. And thank you, everyone who is here present. One thing Prof said that we must take home with, as we do this advocacy, we must know our audience. Who are we trying to influence? What is their interest? And how can we tweak how can we tweak their interest to pass the message across to them? I think that is the goal. And how long are we willing to go? And we must build trust as we communicate. So there is no way we will leave this thing to mediocrity. So we must abide with the ethics and build character and integrity so that we will drive this to change the whole of Africa and not the world. Very soon we'll have Afrolongevity University, a lab, and so many things that will come from here. Thank you once again, and thank you everyone for joining us. We will see you again in our next meeting. Have a wonderful evening.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.